In the scorching heat of Fort Benning, Georgia, something impossible was about to happen. A place where the world's most elite snipers are forged, where grown men with decades of combat experience push their limits beyond human endurance. Where silence means survival and one wrong breath can mean the difference between life and death. But, on this particular Tuesday morning, all eyes were on an 8-year-old girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a rifle nearly as tall as herself. The seasoned military personnel gathered around weren't there to witness a cute photo opportunity or a publicity stunt. They were about to witness history in the making. Colonel Marcus "Iron Eyes" Henderson had seen it all in his 30-year military career. He'd trained Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and Marine snipers who could thread a needle at 800 yards. But, when this little girl stepped up to the firing line, even he couldn't hide his skepticism. What happened next would not only shatter every record on that base but would challenge everything the military thought they knew about natural talent, determination, and the power of the human spirit. This is the true story of how one extraordinary child turned the most elite military training facility upside down, earned the respect of America's deadliest warriors, and proved that sometimes the most incredible abilities come in the most unexpected packages. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Fort Benning when Sarah Chen stepped out of her father's dusty pickup truck. At 8 years old, she barely reached her father's elbow, her small hands clutching a worn leather case that seemed almost as big as she was. Her father, Staff Sergeant David Chen, had been stationed at bases around the world, but Fort Benning held a special place in his heart. It was here that he had earned his sniper qualification 15 years ago, and now he was returning as an instructor. Sarah had always been different from other children her age. While her classmates played with dolls and video games, she spent hours in her father's workshop, carefully dismantling and reassembling mechanical objects with the precision of a seasoned engineer. Her eyes, a striking combination of her Chinese mother's dark intensity and her father's sharp focus, seemed to see details that others missed entirely. The family had moved 17 times in Sarah's short life, following her father's military assignments across 3 continents. Each new school, each new set of neighbors, each new beginning had taught her to adapt quickly and find her place in unfamiliar surroundings. But Fort Benning was different. This wasn't just another temporary stop. Her father had accepted a permanent position here, training the next generation of military snipers. As they walked across the base that first morning, Sarah's eyes absorbed everything. She noticed how the morning dew created tiny prisms on the grass, how the flag moved in patterns that revealed the direction and strength of the wind, how the sound of boots on pavement echoed differently depending on the surface and the weight of the person walking. These weren't conscious observations for a typical child, but Sarah had never been typical. Colonel Marcus Henderson was reviewing training schedules in his office when he first heard about the Chen family's arrival. At 53, Henderson had seen every type of military family imaginable. He knew the challenges that came with constant relocations, the strain on marriages, and the particular difficulties faced by military children who never stayed in one place long enough to form lasting friendships. Henderson had earned his nickname Iron Eyes not just for his legendary accuracy with a rifle, but for his ability to see potential in recruits that others might overlook. He had trained snipers who went on to serve in the most elite special operations units, men and women who could make impossible shots under conditions that would break most people. Yet he also understood that behind every successful soldier was often a family that had made enormous sacrifices. When Staff Sergeant Chen reported for his first day of duty, he brought Sarah along to complete some paperwork and meet the base personnel who would become their extended family. Military bases operate like small towns, with their own schools, medical facilities, and recreational areas. For military families, the base becomes home in a way that transcends geography. Sarah sat quietly in the waiting area outside Henderson's office, her legs swinging from the chair that was too tall for her. She had brought a book about physics that she had borrowed from the base library, though most adults would have found the mathematical concepts challenging. As she read, she unconsciously began calculating angles and trajectories, her mind working through problems that fascinated her in ways that fairy tales and children's stories never could. The meeting between Henderson and Staff Sergeant Chen was routine, covering training schedules, housing arrangements, and the integration of Chen's specialized knowledge into the existing sniper program. Chen had distinguished himself in Afghanistan and Iraq, earning commendations for his ability to make precision shots under extreme pressure. His expertise in wind reading and ballistic calculations had saved countless lives during his deployments. During their conversation, Henderson noticed movement in the waiting area through his office window. The little girl was no longer reading her book. Instead, she was standing at the window, her small hands pressed against the glass, watching the morning training session on the distant firing range. Her stillness was remarkable. While other children might have fidgeted or asked to leave, Sarah stood motionless, her attention completely focused on the tiny figures of snipers practicing their craft nearly a quarter-mile away. When the official meeting concluded, Henderson walked out to meet Sarah properly. He had a granddaughter about the same age and prided himself on being able to connect with children. But, when he knelt down to introduce himself, he was struck by something unusual in Sarah's demeanor. She wasn't shy or intimidated by his imposing presence. Instead, she looked directly at him with an intensity that seemed far beyond her years. "What were you watching out there?" Henderson asked, nodding toward the window. "The shooters," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "They're compensating for wind, but 3 of them are overcorrecting. The wind patterns change every few seconds because of the trees, but they're adjusting based on what happened 30 seconds ago instead of what's happening now." Henderson felt his eyebrows raise involuntarily. He turned to look at Staff Sergeant Chen, who simply shrugged with the expression of a father who had long ago stopped being surprised by his daughter's observations. "How could you tell that from this distance?" Henderson asked, genuinely curious. "You can see it in how they adjust their positions," Sarah explained patiently. "And the impact patterns on the targets. The misses aren't random. They're systematic, which means they're applying corrections that would have been right for earlier conditions." Henderson stood up slowly, his mind processing what he had just heard. In his 3 decades of military service, he had met perhaps a dozen people who could read wind patterns and shooting conditions with that level of sophistication. All of them had been experienced snipers with years of training and combat experience. None of them had been 8 years old. Over the following weeks, Sarah became a familiar presence around the base. Military installations have strict security protocols, but they also operate as close-knit communities where families know and look out for each other. Sarah's quiet presence and unusual interests made her something of a curiosity among the personnel. The base school was adequate, but Sarah had always been academically advanced for her age. Her teachers quickly realized that she needed additional challenges to stay engaged. The base librarian, a retired teacher named Mrs. Rodriguez, began setting aside advanced mathematics and science books for Sarah, marveling at the 8-year-old's appetite for complex technical material. But it was during the after-school hours that Sarah's true fascination revealed itself. While other military children played sports or participated in typical recreational activities, Sarah gravitated toward the technical areas of the base. She would spend hours in her father's workshop, not just observing but asking detailed questions about ballistic coefficients, atmospheric effects on bullet trajectory, and the mechanical principles of precision rifles. Staff Sergeant Chen had initially been concerned about his daughter's intense focus on military equipment and concepts. He had seen too many soldiers who couldn't separate their professional lives from their personal relationships, and he didn't want Sarah to become so immersed in military culture that she lost touch with the normal experiences of childhood. But, as he watched his daughter's genuine fascination with the scientific and mathematical aspects of marksmanship, he began to recognize something special. Sarah wasn't interested in violence or warfare. She was drawn to the precision, the problem-solving, and the incredible complexity of variables that successful snipers must master. To her, it was the ultimate physics experiment. The turning point came on a Friday afternoon in October. Sarah had finished her homework and was sitting in her father's classroom, reading while he prepared lessons for the following week. The classroom overlooked the main training range, where a group of Navy SEAL candidates were struggling with a particularly challenging shooting exercise. The exercise required them to engage targets at varying distances while accounting for complex wind patterns created by the range's geographical features. The course was designed to simulate real-world conditions where environmental factors change rapidly and unpredictably. Even experienced shooters found it challenging, and several of the SEAL candidates were becoming visibly frustrated with their performance. Sarah had been watching the exercise with growing interest, her book forgotten on her lap. She noticed patterns that the shooters seemed to be missing, environmental cues that her unique perspective allowed her to perceive more clearly than the adults who were focused on their immediate performance rather than the broader picture. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Sarah stood up and walked over to her father's desk. "Dad," she said quietly, "the shooters on the range are missing something important about the wind patterns." Staff Sergeant Chen looked up from his lesson plans, then followed his daughter's gaze to the training range below. He could see the SEAL candidates resetting for another round of attempts, their body language revealing their frustration with their performance. "What do you think they're missing?" he asked, partly curious about her observation and partly wanting to understand how her mind was processing the complex scenario. Sarah moved to the window and pointed toward specific areas of the range. "The wind isn't just coming from one direction. There's a primary flow from the west, but the buildings and terrain features are creating smaller circulation patterns. The shooters are reading the wind at their position, but they're not accounting for the different conditions the bullet will encounter during its flight path." Chen felt a familiar chill run down his spine. It was the same feeling he had experienced in combat when a fellow soldier demonstrated an insight or ability that could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. He had learned to trust that feeling, and right now it was telling him that his 8-year-old daughter had just identified something that a group of elite special operations candidates had missed. He set down his pen and walked over to stand beside Sarah at the window. Together, they watched as the next group of candidates took their positions. Chen began to see what his daughter was describing. The subtle signs were there, visible to someone who knew how to read them, but easily missed by shooters who were focused on their immediate technical performance rather than the broader environmental picture. "Have you mentioned this to anyone else?" Chen asked. "No," Sarah replied. "I just noticed it now." Chen considered his options carefully. Military protocol discouraged unsolicited advice, especially from civilians, and particularly from children. But he also knew that effective training required constant evaluation and improvement. If his daughter had identified a genuine factor that was affecting the candidate's performance, it would be irresponsible not to share that information. More importantly, he was beginning to recognize that his daughter possessed an unusual combination of observational skills and analytical ability that might have practical applications in the military context. The question was how to explore that potential without putting her in an uncomfortable or inappropriate situation. That evening, Chen discussed the situation with his wife, Dr. Linda Chen, a physician who had experience with gifted children through her medical practice. Linda had always been supportive of Sarah's intellectual development, but she was also protective of her daughter's emotional well-being. "She's already different enough from other children," Linda pointed out. "I don't want her to become some kind of curiosity or spectacle for your military colleagues." Chen understood his wife's concerns completely. Military bases could be insular environments where anything unusual attracted attention. The last thing he wanted was for Sarah to become the subject of unwanted scrutiny or pressure. But he also recognized that his daughter's abilities were genuinely exceptional, and that they might represent skills that could be valuable in ways that went beyond mere curiosity. The question was how to explore that potential responsibly, in a way that protected Sarah's childhood while acknowledging her unique gifts. The conversation continued late into the evening, with both parents weighing the potential benefits and risks of allowing Sarah to become more involved with the technical aspects of sniper training. They agreed that any exploration would need to be gradual, voluntary on Sarah's part, and carefully supervised to ensure that she never felt pressured to perform or demonstrate her abilities for others' entertainment. Neither of them could have predicted how dramatically their carefully laid plans would change when Colonel Henderson made an unexpected request the following Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected visitor to Staff Sergeant Chen's classroom. Colonel Henderson rarely made personal visits to individual instructors, preferring to communicate through official channels and scheduled meetings. When he appeared in the doorway during Chen's preparation period, it was clear that something significant was on his mind. "Chen, I need to discuss something with you," Henderson said, his tone carrying the weight of authority but also a hint of uncertainty that was unusual for the commanding officer. Sarah was sitting in her usual spot near the window, working on advanced mathematics problems that her teacher had provided for extra credit. She looked up briefly when the colonel entered, offered a polite greeting, then returned to her calculations with the focused concentration that had become her trademark. Henderson had been thinking about the Chen family over the weekend, particularly about his brief conversation with Sarah and her remarkably sophisticated observations about the shooting range. He had made some discreet inquiries about the girl's background and academic performance, learning that she was consistently performing at a level several years above her age group in mathematics and science. More intriguingly, he had spoken with some of the SEAL candidates about their performance on Friday's exercise. Their descriptions of the challenges they had faced aligned precisely with Sarah's observations about the wind patterns and environmental factors affecting their shots. The fact that an 8-year-old had identified issues that experienced special operations personnel had struggled with was both remarkable and potentially significant. "I have an unusual request," Henderson began, choosing his words carefully. We're hosting a training evaluation next week with representatives from multiple special operations units. It's a comprehensive assessment of our sniper training program, and the results will influence funding and resource allocation for the next several years. Chen nodded, understanding the implications. Military training programs were constantly evaluated for effectiveness and efficiency. The results of such evaluations could determine whether programs received increased support or faced budget cuts and personnel reductions. One of the evaluation components focuses on our ability to identify and develop exceptional talent, Henderson continued. The evaluators want to see evidence that we can recognize natural ability and provide appropriate training opportunities, regardless of conventional expectations about age, background, or previous experience. The conversation was heading in a direction that made Chen slightly uncomfortable. He could sense where Henderson might be going with his request, and he wasn't sure he liked the implications for his daughter. "Sir, if you're thinking about involving Sarah in this evaluation, I need to express some concerns," Chen said carefully. "She's still a child, and her mother and I are protective of her normal development." Henderson raised his hand in a gesture that was both understanding and reassuring. "I'm not asking her to perform for evaluators or to become part of some demonstration. What I'm proposing is much more limited and controlled." He explained that the evaluation would include a component where observers could witness the training program's ability to work with individuals who showed natural aptitude for marksmanship. The evaluators were particularly interested in seeing how the program identified and nurtured talent that might not fit conventional profiles. "I'd like Sarah to observe one of the training sessions and provide her analysis of what she sees," Henderson said. "Nothing more than what she did last Friday when she identified the wind pattern issues. The evaluators would be interested in her observations, but she wouldn't be required to perform or demonstrate any physical skills." Chen considered the proposal carefully. On one hand, he understood the potential value of showcasing the training program's sophistication and adaptability. On the other hand, he was concerned about putting his daughter in a position where she might feel pressure to perform or where her unique abilities might be exploited for administrative purposes. "Can I discuss this with my wife and with Sarah?" Chen asked. Any decision would need to be something that Sarah wanted to do, not something imposed on her. Henderson agreed completely. He emphasized that the proposal was entirely voluntary and that Sarah's well-being was the primary consideration. If she showed any reluctance or discomfort, the idea would be abandoned immediately. That evening, the Chen family held a lengthy discussion about Henderson's proposal. Linda Chen's initial reaction was skeptical. As a physician, she had seen too many cases where gifted children were pushed beyond appropriate limits by well-meaning adults who lost sight of the child's emotional needs. But, as they talked through the details, both parents began to recognize that the proposal might actually align with Sarah's genuine interests. She had been spending increasing amounts of time observing the training activities on the base, asking sophisticated questions about the technical aspects of marksmanship, and demonstrating a level of understanding that surprised even her father. Sarah herself was characteristically direct in her response. "I'd like to try it," she said simply. "I enjoy watching the training, and I've been wondering if my observations are actually useful or just interesting to me." Her parents established clear ground rules. Sarah would participate only if she felt comfortable doing so. She could stop at any time without explanation or consequence. The focus would be on her analytical observations, not on any physical demonstration. And her parents would be present throughout the entire process. The following week, the evaluation team arrived at Fort Benning. The group included representatives from Navy Special Warfare Command, Army Special Operations Command, Marine Corps Special Operations Command, and several civilian experts in training methodology and performance psychology. The evaluation process was comprehensive, examining every aspect of the sniper training program from recruitment and selection through advanced skill development. The evaluators observed classroom instruction, practical exercises, psychological assessments, and equipment procedures. Colonel Henderson had scheduled Sarah's observation session for Thursday afternoon, during a complex training exercise that would showcase the program's most advanced instruction methods. The exercise involved multiple shooting positions, varying distances, complex environmental conditions, and time pressure designed to simulate real-world operational scenarios. The participants were a group of experienced snipers from different military branches who were attending an advanced course in precision shooting and environmental analysis. These were not novice students, but seasoned professionals seeking to refine their skills and learn the latest techniques and technologies. Sarah arrived at the observation area accompanied by both parents and Colonel Henderson. The evaluators had been briefed on her background and the purpose of her participation, but they had not been told about her previous observations or any specific expectations about her performance. The observation area was positioned to provide a clear view of the training range while maintaining appropriate safety distances. Sarah was provided with high-quality binoculars and a notebook where she could record any observations she wanted to share. As the training exercise began, Sarah settled into a comfortable position and began her systematic observation of the activities below. Her approach was methodical and thorough, examining not just the shooter's performance but the environmental conditions, equipment factors, and instructional methods being employed. The exercise was designed to challenge even experienced snipers. The course required participants to engage targets at distances ranging from 300 to 1,200 meters, with complex terrain features that created varying wind conditions and visibility challenges. The targets were positioned to require precise range estimation and careful consideration of ballistic factors. During the first phase of the exercise, Sarah noticed several factors that appeared to be affecting the shooter's performance. She began making notes about wind patterns, lighting conditions, and what appeared to be systematic errors in range estimation that were causing consistent misses at specific distances. About halfway through the exercise, one of the evaluators approached Colonel Henderson with a question about Sarah's observations. The evaluator had been watching her methodical approach and was curious about what she was recording in her notebook. Henderson asked Sarah if she was comfortable sharing her preliminary observations with the group. She nodded and began explaining what she had noticed about the environmental conditions and their effects on the shooter's performance. The wind is creating 3 distinct zones with different characteristics, Sarah explained, pointing to specific areas of the range. In the first zone, from here to about 400 meters, the wind is relatively steady from the west at about 8 miles per hour. But, between 400 and 800 meters, the terrain features are creating turbulence that changes direction every few seconds. She continued her analysis, describing how the lighting conditions were creating visibility challenges that the shooters were compensating for inconsistently, and how the range estimation errors appeared to be systematic rather than random, suggesting that the shooters were using range-finding techniques that worked well under ideal conditions but were less effective in the current environmental situation. The evaluators listened with growing interest as Sarah provided a comprehensive analysis that demonstrated not just observational skills but a sophisticated understanding of the complex relationships between environmental factors and shooting performance. Her observations were specific, technical, and delivered with a clarity that would have been impressive from an experienced instructor. More importantly, her analysis included practical suggestions for addressing the issues she had identified. She recommended specific adjustment techniques for dealing with the turbulent wind conditions, alternative range estimation methods that would be more effective in the current visibility conditions, and modifications to shooting positions that would minimize the effects of the environmental challenges. Dr. Patricia Williams, one of the civilian evaluators and a specialist in performance psychology, was particularly struck by Sarah's approach to the observation task. Rather than simply identifying problems, Sarah was analyzing the underlying causes and developing potential solutions. This type of systematic problem-solving represented cognitive abilities that typically developed much later in life. When the exercise concluded, the evaluators asked if they could discuss Sarah's observations with the participating snipers. The feedback session revealed that Sarah had identified several factors that the experienced shooters had noticed but hadn't fully analyzed, as well as some environmental conditions that they had missed entirely. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a Marine sniper with 12 years of experience, was amazed by the accuracy of Sarah's wind analysis. "I felt the changing conditions," he admitted, "but I couldn't identify the specific zones or predict the patterns the way she described them." The evaluators were equally impressed by the sophistication of Sarah's observations and the practical value of her suggestions. They asked if she would be willing to observe one more exercise the following day, this time with different environmental conditions and a more complex course design. Sarah agreed enthusiastically. She had enjoyed the analytical challenge and was curious to see whether her approach would work under different circumstances. Her parents were pleased to see how comfortable she appeared throughout the process and how much she seemed to enjoy applying her observational skills to practical problems. Friday morning brought different weather conditions that created an entirely new set of challenges for the training exercise. Rain had moved through the area overnight, leaving the range wet and creating atmospheric conditions that significantly affected visibility and bullet trajectory. The participating snipers were a different group, including several instructors from other military installations who were attending the evaluation as part of their own professional development. The exercise was designed to be even more challenging than Thursday's session, with longer distances, smaller targets, and more complex terrain features. Sarah approached the second observation session with greater confidence, having refined her methodology based on the previous day's experience. She had also spent time that evening researching atmospheric effects on bullet trajectory and discussing some of the technical details with her father. As the exercise progressed, Sarah's observations became even more detailed and sophisticated. She identified subtle changes in atmospheric conditions that were affecting bullet flight paths, noticed patterns in the shooter's performance that suggested specific areas where additional training might be beneficial, and developed recommendations for equipment modifications that could improve effectiveness under the challenging conditions. But the most remarkable moment came during the final phase of the exercise, when Sarah noticed something that none of the adult observers had detected. One of the participating instructors was making consistent adjustments to his shooting position that didn't seem to match the environmental conditions Sarah was observing. She mentioned this to Colonel Henderson, who initially assumed that the instructor was employing advanced techniques that might not be immediately obvious to an inexperienced observer. But, as they watched more carefully, Henderson began to see what Sarah was describing. The instructor appeared to be compensating for equipment problems rather than environmental factors. His rifle scope seemed to be shifting slightly with each shot, creating a systematic error that he was unconsciously correcting through body positioning rather than addressing the mechanical issue directly. Henderson discreetly communicated this observation to the range safety officer, who approached the instructor during a break in the exercise. A quick inspection revealed that the scope mounting system had indeed loosened slightly, creating exactly the type of shifting that Sarah had detected through her careful observation of the instructor's shooting pattern and position adjustments. The discovery prevented what could have become a significant safety issue and demonstrated a level of observational sophistication that impressed even the most experienced military personnel present. The evaluators realized they had witnessed something truly exceptional, not just in terms of natural ability but in the application of analytical skills to practical problem solving in a complex technical environment. As Friday afternoon concluded, the evaluation team prepared to compile their comprehensive assessment of the Fort Benning sniper training program. But they had also witnessed something that would influence their understanding of talent identification and development in ways that would extend far beyond the immediate evaluation process. The weekend following the evaluation brought an unexpected development that would change everything for Sarah and her family. Dr. Patricia Williams, the performance psychology expert who had observed Sarah's analytical abilities, requested a private meeting with Colonel Henderson and the Chen family. Dr. Williams had spent 20 years studying exceptional talent in high-performance environments, working with everyone from Olympic athletes to NASA astronauts. Her specialty was identifying and developing abilities that fell outside normal performance parameters. What she had witnessed during Sarah's observation sessions represented something she had never encountered before in her professional career. The meeting took place in Henderson's office on Saturday morning, with both of Sarah's parents present and Sarah herself included in the discussion. Williams wanted to speak directly with Sarah about her experience and interests, believing that any meaningful assessment required understanding the individual's own perspective on their abilities. Sarah, Williams began, I've been watching how you analyze the shooting exercises, and I'm curious about how you approach these observations. When you're watching the shooters, what exactly are you paying attention to? Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. I watch everything, she said simply. The way they breathe, how they position themselves, how they react to changes in the environment. But, mostly, I watch the patterns. Everything has patterns if you know how to look for them. Williams nodded, recognizing the sophisticated cognitive processes that Sarah was describing without necessarily having the technical vocabulary to explain them in academic terms. The ability to perceive complex patterns across multiple variables simultaneously was a hallmark of exceptional analytical intelligence. Have you ever been interested in trying to shoot yourself? Williams asked. Not for any official purpose, just out of curiosity about whether your observations translate into practical skills. The question caught everyone off guard, including Sarah. She had been so focused on the analytical aspects of marksmanship that she had never seriously considered whether her understanding might translate into actual shooting ability. I've never really thought about it, Sarah admitted. I've been more interested in figuring out why some people shoot better than others and what factors affect accuracy. Colonel Henderson had been thinking along similar lines, though he had hesitated to raise the subject without input from performance experts like Williams. Military protocol typically prohibited civilians, particularly children, from participating in weapons training except under very specific circumstances. But there were provisions for controlled exposure to military equipment for educational and assessment purposes. "What exactly are you proposing?" Linda Chen asked, her protective instincts clearly engaged. Williams explained that she was interested in conducting a comprehensive assessment of Sarah's spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and motor coordination abilities. This would involve a series of cognitive tests as well as some practical exercises designed to evaluate whether Sarah's observational skills corresponded to physical capabilities. The shooting component would be completely voluntary and conducted under the strictest safety protocols, Williams assured the family. "We would start with basic mechanical exercises, and if Sarah showed interest and aptitude, we might progress to actual shooting under carefully controlled conditions." The proposal represented uncharted territory for everyone involved. Military regulations had provisions for civilian participation in training activities, but those provisions typically apply to adults with specific professional qualifications. Working with a child required additional approvals and safety measures that would need to be developed specifically for this situation. David Chen found himself torn between protective concern for his daughter and professional curiosity about her abilities. As a sniper instructor, he understood better than most people the complexity of skills required for precision shooting. If Sarah possessed natural aptitude that corresponded to her analytical abilities, it could represent something truly remarkable. "Let me be completely clear about one thing," Chen said firmly. "Sarah's safety and well-being are the absolute priority. If she shows any discomfort or reluctance, or if anyone pressures her in any way, the entire thing stops immediately." Henderson and Williams both agreed emphatically. They emphasized that the assessment would be conducted entirely at Sarah's pace, with multiple opportunities for her to withdraw without consequence. The focus would be on understanding her abilities rather than pushing her to demonstrate specific performance levels. After extensive discussion, the family agreed to allow Williams to conduct preliminary cognitive assessments, with the understanding that any practical exercises would be subject to additional evaluation and approval. Sarah herself was curious about the testing process and eager to learn more about her own abilities. The cognitive assessment took place the following Monday in a specially prepared testing facility on the base. Williams administered a comprehensive battery of tests designed to evaluate spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, visual processing, and motor coordination. The testing was conducted in a relaxed, game-like atmosphere that made the process enjoyable rather than stressful for Sarah. The results were extraordinary by any measure. Sarah scored in the 99th percentile or higher on every component of the assessment, with several scores that exceeded the normal range of the testing instruments. Her spatial reasoning abilities were comparable to those of professional engineers and architects, while her pattern recognition skills exceeded those of experienced intelligence analysts. Most remarkably, Sarah's hand-eye coordination and fine motor control scores suggested natural physical abilities that could support the precise movements required for expert marksmanship. The combination of exceptional cognitive abilities with superior physical coordination represented a convergence of talents that Williams had never encountered in her professional experience. These results suggest that Sarah possesses the fundamental neurological and physical capabilities that underlie expert performance in precision tasks, Williams explained to the family. "The question is whether these capabilities would translate into practical shooting skills." The conversation that followed was careful and thorough, with everyone involved understanding the unprecedented nature of what they were considering. Military regulations required multiple levels of approval for any civilian participation in weapons training, and those requirements were even more stringent when involving a minor. Colonel Henderson took responsibility for navigating the regulatory requirements, working with base legal officers and safety personnel to develop protocols that would allow Sarah to participate in controlled shooting exercises while maintaining absolute compliance with all applicable regulations. The process took 2 weeks of preparation, involving detailed safety planning, specialized equipment modifications, and the development of training protocols specifically designed for Sarah's age and size. Every aspect of the planned exercises was reviewed by multiple safety officers and approved by senior command personnel. The first practical session took place on a Wednesday afternoon on a specialized training range that had been configured specifically for the assessment. The range was completely isolated, with only essential personnel present and multiple safety officers monitoring every aspect of the exercise. Sarah was fitted with specially modified safety equipment and introduced to a precision rifle that had been adjusted to accommodate her smaller stature. The initial exercises focused entirely on basic mechanical operations, familiarizing her with the equipment without any pressure to demonstrate accuracy or performance. Williams and Henderson observed carefully as Sarah examined the rifle with the same methodical attention she brought to her analytical observations. She asked detailed questions about the mechanical principles, the optical systems, and the relationship between the equipment and the environmental factors she had been studying. The first actual shooting exercise was conducted at very close range with large targets, designed to ensure success while allowing Sarah to experience the physical aspects of marksmanship. The focus was on safety procedures, basic mechanics, and comfort with the equipment rather than accuracy or performance. Sarah approached the shooting exercise with the same careful methodology she applied to everything else. She spent considerable time in preparation, asking questions about breathing techniques, body positioning, and sight alignment. Her questions demonstrated an understanding of the theoretical principles that typically took months for students to develop. When she finally took her first shot, the result was immediately apparent to everyone present. The bullet struck the center of the target with a precision that was remarkable for any first-time shooter, but particularly extraordinary for an 8-year-old child. More importantly, Sarah's reaction to the shooting experience was one of focused concentration rather than excitement or nervousness. She seemed to instinctively understand the mental discipline required for precision shooting, maintaining her composure and analytical focus throughout the exercise. The second and third shots were equally precise, suggesting that the first shot had not been simply luck or coincidence. Sarah was demonstrating natural shooting ability that corresponded directly to her analytical capabilities and cognitive assessment results. Dr. Williams observed every aspect of Sarah's performance, noting not just the accuracy of her shots but her approach to the shooting process. Sarah was unconsciously applying many of the advanced techniques that typically required extensive training to develop, suggesting an intuitive understanding of the complex relationships between mental focus, physical control, and environmental factors. After completing the basic shooting exercises, Sarah was eager to try more challenging targets and distances. Her parents and the supervising personnel agreed to gradually increase the difficulty level, while maintaining strict safety protocols and careful monitoring of her comfort and performance levels. The progression over the following weeks was remarkable. Sarah consistently demonstrated shooting accuracy that exceeded normal expectations for beginning shooters by substantial margins. More significantly, she showed rapid improvement in areas that typically required extensive practice to develop. By the end of the month, Sarah was consistently hitting targets at distances that challenged experienced shooters, while maintaining accuracy levels that would have been impressive for any adult. Her natural ability was becoming undeniable, supported by cognitive capabilities that allowed her to analyze and adjust her performance in real time. The military personnel observing Sarah's development were faced with something they had never encountered before. Standard training protocols and performance expectations simply didn't apply to someone with her unique combination of natural abilities and analytical skills. Colonel Henderson found himself in the position of having to develop entirely new approaches to training and assessment, while ensuring that Sarah's exceptional abilities were developed appropriately without compromising her normal childhood development. The situation attracted attention from senior military leadership, performance psychology researchers, and training specialists from across the military establishment. Everyone wanted to understand how an 8-year-old had developed capabilities that typically required years of intensive training to achieve. But the most significant challenge was yet to come. Word of Sarah's abilities had reached the highest levels of military command, and requests were beginning to arrive for demonstrations and assessments that would put her skills to the ultimate test. The pressure was building for Sarah to attempt something that would either confirm her exceptional abilities beyond any doubt or potentially expose the limitations of what even the most gifted child could reasonably be expected to achieve. The stage was being set for a test that would challenge everything the military thought they knew about talent, training, and human potential. And, at the center of it all was an 8-year-old girl who simply wanted to understand how things worked and why some people performed better than others. The call came on a Thursday morning in November, just as the Georgia autumn was painting the base in brilliant colors. Major General Patricia Adams, commanding officer of the Army's entire sniper training program, was personally requesting a demonstration of Sarah's abilities. The request came with the kind of official weight that made refusal virtually impossible, but also with assurances that the assessment would be conducted with the highest levels of professionalism and safety. General Adams had built her career on identifying and developing exceptional talent in military contexts. She had personally overseen the training of snipers who went on to serve in the most elite special operations units, and she had a reputation for recognizing ability that others might overlook. Her interest in Sarah represented both an unprecedented opportunity and a significant challenge for everyone involved. The proposed assessment would take place at the National Guard Marksmanship Training Center, a facility specifically designed for precision shooting competitions and advanced training. The center featured the most sophisticated shooting ranges in the military system, with distances extending beyond 1,500 meters and environmental control systems that could simulate virtually any conditions that snipers might encounter in the field. More significantly, the assessment would involve attempting to break several official records for precision shooting accuracy. These records had been established by the most elite snipers in military history, individuals with decades of experience and thousands of hours of training. The fact that an 8-year-old was being considered for such an attempt was unprecedented in military history. Sarah's parents faced the most difficult decision of their lives. On one hand, they recognized that their daughter possessed genuine exceptional abilities that deserved appropriate recognition and development. On the other hand, they were acutely aware of the pressure and scrutiny that would accompany such a high-profile assessment. The family held extensive discussions about the implications of proceeding with the record attempt. Linda Chen was particularly concerned about the psychological pressure that Sarah might experience, while David Chen worried about the long-term effects on his daughter's relationship with the military community. But Sarah herself was characteristically direct in her response. "I want to see how well I can do," she said simply. "I've been wondering whether my abilities are as good as everyone thinks they are, or if I've just been lucky so far." Her matter-of-fact approach to the situation was both reassuring and remarkable. Sarah seemed to understand that the assessment was an opportunity to test her abilities rather than a performance that would determine her worth or future opportunities. The preparation for the record attempt was exhaustive and carefully planned. Every aspect of the assessment was designed to ensure fairness, safety, and accuracy. Independent observers from multiple military branches would verify the results, and the entire process would be documented to ensure transparency and credibility. Sarah spent 2 weeks familiarizing herself with the specialized equipment and range conditions at the training center. The rifles she would use were identical to those employed by elite military snipers, though modified slightly to accommodate her smaller stature. The targets and distances were exactly the same as those used for official record attempts by adult snipers. The range at the training center was a marvel of engineering precision. Environmental factors could be controlled and monitored to ensure consistent conditions, while advanced measurement systems could track bullet trajectories and impact points with incredible accuracy. Every shot would be measured and verified by multiple independent systems. Dr. Williams continued to monitor Sarah's psychological well-being throughout the preparation process, ensuring that she remained comfortable and confident rather than anxious or pressured. The assessment protocols had been carefully designed to minimize stress while maintaining the rigorous standards required for official record verification. The morning of the assessment dawned clear and calm, with ideal weather conditions for precision shooting. Sarah arrived at the training center accompanied by her parents, Colonel Henderson, Dr. Williams, and a small team of military personnel who would supervise and verify the assessment. General Adams was present to observe personally, along with representatives from the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force Special Operations communities. The presence of such senior leadership underscored the significance of what everyone understood might be a historic moment in military training. The first record attempt would be for accuracy at 600 meters, a distance that challenged even experienced snipers but was considered within the range of possibility for someone with exceptional natural ability. The existing record required hitting a target the size of a playing card consistently under controlled conditions. Sarah approached the first attempt with the same methodical preparation she brought to every shooting exercise. She spent considerable time analyzing the environmental conditions, adjusting her equipment, and preparing mentally for the challenge ahead. The range fell completely silent as Sarah took her shooting position. The target, barely visible at 600 meters, required not just exceptional accuracy but the mental discipline to maintain perfect consistency across multiple shots. Sarah's first shot struck the target dead center, well within the parameters required for the record. The second shot was equally precise, followed by a third that actually improved on the first two. By the time she completed the required sequence of shots, she had not only broken the existing record but had exceeded it by a margin that shocked even the most experienced observers. The independent verification systems confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Sarah had achieved a level of accuracy at 600 meters that surpassed the performance of elite military snipers with decades of training and combat experience. But the 600-meter record was just the beginning. The assessment protocol included attempts at increasingly challenging distances and conditions, each designed to test the absolute limits of human precision shooting capability. The second record attempt was at 800 meters under simulated wind conditions designed to replicate the most challenging environmental factors that snipers encounter in operational situations. The existing record had been established by a Navy SEAL sniper with 15 years of experience and multiple combat deployments. Sarah's approach to the 800-meter challenge demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of environmental factors that had first caught Colonel Henderson's attention months earlier. She spent additional time analyzing the simulated wind patterns, making calculations that incorporated factors that many adult shooters would have overlooked. Her performance at 800 meters was even more remarkable than her 600-meter shooting. Not only did she break the existing record, but she did so while making real-time adjustments for changing environmental conditions that demonstrated an intuitive understanding of ballistics and atmospheric effects that typically required years to develop. The observers were witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about talent development and human performance limitations. Sarah was not just shooting accurately, she was demonstrating mastery of complex skills that were supposed to require extensive training and experience to acquire. The final and most challenging record attempt was at 1,000 meters, a distance that represented the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting capability. The existing record had been established by a Marine Corps sniper who was widely regarded as one of the most accomplished marksmen in military history. At 1,000 meters, the target was barely visible even through high-powered optics, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Environmental factors that were minor considerations at shorter distances became critical variables that could determine success or failure. Sarah's preparation for the 1,000-meter attempt was exhaustive. She spent over an hour analyzing every aspect of the shooting environment, making precise calculations about atmospheric effects, and adjusting her equipment to account for the extreme distance. The range was absolutely silent as she took her position for the most challenging shots of the assessment. Even the most experienced observers understood that they were witnessing an attempt that would either establish Sarah as the most naturally gifted marksman in military history or demonstrate the practical limitations of exceptional talent without extensive training. Sarah's first shot at 1,000 meters struck the target within the required parameters, but not with the overwhelming precision she had demonstrated at shorter distances. The second shot was better, and the third was better still. It became clear that she was making real-time adjustments based on feedback from each shot, demonstrating the adaptive learning ability that separated truly exceptional performers from merely talented individuals. By the time she completed the required sequence, Sarah had achieved something that stunned everyone present. She had not only broken the 1,000-meter record but had done so while demonstrating a level of precision that exceeded what many experienced snipers could achieve under ideal conditions. The independent verification systems confirmed the results multiple times. An 8-year-old girl had just broken precision shooting records that had been established by the most elite military snipers in the world. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Sarah's performance was her reaction to achieving these unprecedented results. Rather than celebrating or expressing excitement, she was immediately focused on analyzing what she had learned and how she might improve further. The environmental factors at 1,000 meters create patterns that are different from shorter distances, she explained to the assembled observers. I think I could do better if I had more time to understand how the atmospheric effects change across the entire bullet trajectory. General Adams approached Sarah after the verification process was complete, her expression revealing the profound impact of what she had witnessed. "Young lady," the general said, "you have just achieved something that will change how we think about talent and training in ways that we're only beginning to understand." The implications of Sarah's record-breaking performance extended far beyond the immediate achievement. Military training programs would need to be re-evaluated in light of what had been demonstrated about the relationship between natural ability and learned skills. More importantly, Sarah's success raised fundamental questions about human potential and the factors that determine exceptional performance. If an 8-year-old could achieve this level of precision shooting capability, what other assumptions about talent development and training might need to be reconsidered? The news of Sarah's achievement spread rapidly through military and civilian communities, attracting attention from researchers, educators, and policymakers interested in understanding the implications of her exceptional abilities. But, for Sarah and her family, the most important question was what would come next. The record she had broken had established her as a unique individual in military history, but they had also created expectations and opportunities that would shape her future in ways that no one could fully predict. The 8-year-old girl who had started as a curious observer of military training had become the center of discussions about human potential that would influence military training, educational policy, and performance psychology for years to come. And she was just getting started. 6 months after Sarah's record-breaking performance, Fort Benning had become the center of revolutionary changes in military training that extended far beyond marksmanship instruction. The implications of what an 8-year-old had achieved were reshaping fundamental assumptions about talent identification, training methodology, and human potential across the entire military establishment. The Chen family found themselves at the center of attention from researchers, educators, military leaders, and media representatives from around the world. Everyone wanted to understand how Sarah's exceptional abilities had developed and what her achievements meant for the future of military training and human performance research. Dr. Patricia Williams had established a comprehensive research program focused on studying the cognitive and physiological factors that contributed to Sarah's remarkable capabilities. The research had attracted funding from the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, and several major universities interested in understanding the neurological basis of exceptional talent. The study results were revolutionary in their implications. Sarah's brain scans revealed unusual patterns of neural connectivity in areas associated with spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and motor control. More significantly, her cognitive processing showed characteristics that typically developed only after years of intensive training and experience. What we're seeing in Sarah challenges our basic understanding of how expertise develops, Williams explained to a gathering of military training specialists and performance psychology researchers. She appears to possess innate cognitive structures that allow her to process complex information in ways that typically require extensive learning and practice to achieve. The research findings had immediate practical applications for military training programs. If Sarah's abilities represented one extreme of natural talent distribution, then understanding the factors that contributed to her performance could help identify and develop exceptional ability in other individuals. Colonel Henderson had been promoted to Brigadier General and appointed to lead a new military training research initiative based largely on insights gained from studying Sarah's development. The program was designed to revolutionize how the military identified, recruited, and trained personnel for specialized roles requiring exceptional performance. Sarah has shown us that our traditional approaches to talent identification may be missing individuals with extraordinary potential, Henderson explained to a congressional committee reviewing military training budgets. We need to develop new methods for recognizing and developing exceptional abilities that don't fit conventional patterns. The new training program incorporated several innovations inspired by Sarah's development. Cognitive assessment protocols were expanded to include measures of pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and adaptive learning ability. Training methods were modified to accommodate individuals who demonstrated rapid skill acquisition and unconventional learning patterns. Most importantly, the program eliminated many of the traditional barriers based on age, background, and conventional qualifications that might prevent exceptional individuals from accessing appropriate training opportunities. Sarah herself continued to develop her abilities while maintaining her focus on education and normal childhood activities. Her parents had been careful to ensure that her exceptional capabilities didn't overwhelm her personal development or create unrealistic expectations about her future. The family had established clear boundaries around Sarah's involvement in military activities, ensuring that her participation remained voluntary and aligned with her own interests rather than external pressures. She continued to attend regular school, participate in age-appropriate activities, and maintain friendships with other children her age. But Sarah's influence on military training continued to expand through the research and program development that her achievements had inspired. Training centers across the country began implementing modified assessment and instruction methods based on insights gained from studying her cognitive and performance characteristics. The impact extended beyond military applications. Educational researchers became interested in understanding how Sarah's learning patterns might inform teaching methods for gifted children. Sports psychologists wanted to understand the relationship between her cognitive abilities and physical performance.
Neuroscientists were fascinated by the implications for understanding brain development and exceptional talent.
One of the most significant developments was the establishment of specialized training programs designed to identify and develop exceptional talent in children and young adults. These programs combine rigorous academic instruction with practical skill development, allowing young people with unusual abilities to develop their potential while maintaining appropriate educational and social experiences. Sarah became the first participant in a pilot program that combined advanced academic coursework with specialized military training adapted for younger participants. The program was designed to develop her analytical and technical abilities while ensuring that she maintained normal childhood experiences and relationships. The curriculum included advanced mathematics, physics, and engineering coursework that supported her interest in understanding the technical aspects of precision shooting and military equipment. But it also included typical childhood activities, social interaction with peers, and exposure to diverse interests and career possibilities. By her 10th birthday, Sarah had become something of a legend in military circles, but also a symbol of the importance of recognizing and nurturing exceptional talent regardless of conventional expectations. Her story was taught in military academies as an example of how traditional thinking about ability and training could limit the development of extraordinary potential. The records she had established remained unbroken, not because others hadn't attempted to surpass them, but because her combination of natural ability, analytical intelligence, and intuitive understanding of complex technical factors represented a convergence of capabilities that was genuinely unprecedented. More importantly, Sarah's achievements had sparked a broader reconsideration of human potential and the factors that determine exceptional performance. Military training programs, educational institutions, and research organizations had begun to develop new approaches based on understanding that exceptional ability could manifest in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. The long-term implications of Sarah's story extended far beyond her individual achievements. Her success had demonstrated that traditional assumptions about age, experience, and training requirements might prevent society from recognizing and developing extraordinary talent that could contribute to national security, scientific advancement, and human progress. Military recruitment and training programs were permanently changed by the insights gained from studying Sarah's development. New assessment methods identified individuals with exceptional potential who might have been overlooked by traditional screening processes. Training protocols were modified to accommodate rapid skill acquisition and unconventional learning patterns. Educational policy was also influenced by Sarah's story, with increased emphasis on identifying and supporting gifted children whose abilities might not align with conventional academic expectations. Specialized programs were developed to provide appropriate challenges and opportunities for young people whose talents required unique educational approaches.
The research program initiated by Dr.
Williams continued to produce insights that influenced understanding of human cognitive development, talent identification, and performance optimization. The neurological and psychological factors that contributed to Sarah's exceptional abilities provided a foundation for developing new approaches to human potential development across multiple fields. As Sarah approached her teenage years, her story had become part of military history and educational legend. But, perhaps more importantly, her achievements had opened doors for other young people whose exceptional abilities might previously have gone unrecognized or undeveloped. The little girl who had once stood at a window watching snipers practice had become the catalyst for fundamental changes in how society thinks about talent, training, and human potential. Her legacy would influence military training, educational policy, and performance psychology for generations to come. But Sarah herself remained focused on learning, growing, and understanding the world around her with the same curiosity and analytical precision that had first caught Colonel Henderson's attention. She had proven that exceptional achievement was possible at any age, under the right circumstances, with appropriate support and recognition. Her story continues to inspire military personnel, educators, and researchers who understand that the next breakthrough in human performance might come from the most unexpected source. The 8-year-old who shattered every sniper record had shown that human potential knows no conventional boundaries, and that extraordinary achievement is possible when natural talent meets opportunity, support, and the courage to challenge traditional assumptions. The little girl with pigtails who had once observed shooting exercises from a classroom window had changed military history forever. And her influence on how society recognizes, develops, and celebrates exceptional human potential would continue to grow for years to come. In the end, Sarah's story was about more than shooting records or military training. It was about the importance of remaining open to the possibility that extraordinary ability can emerge anywhere, at any time, and in any person willing to pursue their potential with dedication, curiosity, and courage. Her legacy would ensure that future generations of exceptional young people would have the opportunities and support necessary to develop their unique talents, regardless of how unconventional those talents might appear to traditional thinking. The girl who had asked why some shooters performed better than others had found her answer, and, in doing so, had changed the way the world thinks about what human beings can achieve when their potential is recognized, nurtured, and given the opportunity to flourish.